right now on a special edition of the National Weather Desk. It's been 20 years since Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans.
I'm telling you, something like this could have a huge economic impact on the entire country.
It was like a nightmare, that's what it was.
We'll look back at the disaster and its impact on the Gulf Coast.
They can close that wall and it protects us up to 28 feet of storm surge.
How survivors' lives have changed over the last 2 decades.
To be perfectly honest, if I was probably in New Orleans, I'd either be dead or in jail.
The truth is hard, at least it's fair, sad, but true, I'll tape you. I was there.
Hear from meteorologists who worked through the storm, including one whose wife went into labor.
My wife, my newborn son had to be evacuated.
And how hurricane forecasting has improved.
Back in 2005, tropical weather outlooks were just a block of plain text.
It's all right now as the National Weather Desk remembers Katrina. I'm meteorologist Eileen Whalen. Well, 20 years ago, Hurricane Katrina made landfall along the Gulf Coast. What followed in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama would be one of the worst natural disasters in our nation's history. This morning, we'll revisit those terrible days and see how things have changed all these years later. We start this morning with meteorologist Emily Gracie with a look at how Hurricane Katrina grew into a monster storm.
Katrina was born just 6 days earlier as a tropical depression over the Bahamas. 2 days later, it made its first landfall as a Category 1 hurricane over southeast Florida. The brief interaction with land caused minor weakening, but it didn't last long. It's a term we've heard many times in recent years, but it was unfamiliar at the time. Rapid intensification. That's exactly what happened when it hit the warm, open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. It soon became a rare Category 5 hurricane with winds reaching 175 miles per hour. By the time it reached the Louisiana and Mississippi coasts, it had weakened to a Cat 3. But the storm surge was still massive and the impact devastating. 80% of New Orleans flooded after the levee system failed. Highways and roads collapsed, stranding tens of thousands of people. The lower Ninth Ward was especially hard hit. The hurricane-force winds blew out windows in downtown buildings and significantly damaged the Superdome, which is serving as an emergency shelter. Mississippi also suffered serious damage. A storm surge of nearly 28 feet was measured at Pass Christian. The storm and its remnants brought rain, winds, and a few tornadoes along a path all the way to Canada. 20 years later, it is still one of the deadliest hurricanes in American history.
Here's a look at Katrina by the numbers. Newly revised numbers show nearly 1,400 deaths are blamed on the hurricane. The Coast Guard rescued more than 33,000 people just in New Orleans. The storm surge reached 28 feet along the Mississippi coast. Peak winds hit 175 miles per hour. That came while it was a Category 5 over the Gulf. And Katrina caused $125 billion in damage. That's in 2005 dollars. When adjusted for inflation, it's still the costliest hurricane in U.S. history. An estimated 1.5 million people evacuated due to Katrina. Many returned to find nothing left of their homes, and tens of thousands decided it would be best to continue their lives elsewhere. Jade Lawson introduces us to 2 people who left everything behind and moved to Maryland and Virginia.
We just didn't know where to go or what to do. We were lost.
In the early hours of August 29, 2005, Hurricane Katrina made landfall in Louisiana.
I remember the night of the storm, that morning of the storm. I remember going to the window, looking out the window, and the only thing I could hear was dogs and cats crying. I couldn't believe that it was so dark out there, like everything was just black. I mean, it was like a nightmare, that's what it was. The storm was calm and it did pass. Yeah. And we started rejoicing and being happy and cleaning our houses and sweeping out the water, cleaning up the debris. And then all of a sudden, the levee broke. We knew that the water was coming, and the water was coming fast. I remember we came here to Maryland and we met so many people that wanted to help us.
I literally came here with a pair of shorts, some underwear, and a couple shirts. That was it. Realizing that you can't go back, nothing that you had is there.
The catastrophic damage, too much for the government to handle. 80% of New Orleans submerged underwater. The city was damaged, decayed, and over 1 million people displaced. While their roots were washed away after the storm, Rose Davis and Robert Simmons plant new ones.
It has been a good thing for me to grow mentally, grow professionally. I work in IT. I would have never done that. To be perfectly honest, if I was probably in New Orleans, I'd either be dead or in jail. And that's the sad reality of it.
I have made a life here, and it's a better life. Since I've been here, I have 18 years clean and sober from crack cocaine. You know, my whole life has turned around. I never want to forget where I came from. I'm just grateful that I had the opportunity to change my life around in the midst of a storm.
Well, meteorologist John Gumbs' Katrina story is truly unique. Now chief in Cincinnati, John was a morning meteorologist at a New Orleans television station in 2005. He opens up about how his memories of those days are so vivid and why he's still thankful, even now.
Hurricane Katrina was a life-changing storm for me and my family. As Katrina came off the Florida coast, the model data had shifted dramatically. And every single piece of data that I looked at that morning and into the afternoon continued to paint a worst-case scenario for the city of New Orleans.
I mean, we have a lot of concerns with this storm, Eric, and
I was sad. I was extremely upset myself, but I had a job to do, and I did that job. But at the same time, I was transparent with my feelings. I was transparent about the feeling of dread, the feeling of doom that I had.
It's a big storm, Eric. It's getting bigger.
And I tried to put myself in the viewer's shoes. You know, what would they be feeling? What would they be thinking? The other part of that horrible feeling I had was because my wife was 9 months pregnant with our first child. I broadcast that day for over 12 hours straight, giving the worst case scenario for the city. This message that I received from my wife would change everything. She told me that she was in labor and she was having a friend take her to the hospital. My son was born. Connor Jacob Gum came into the world just over 24 hours before Hurricane Katrina would make landfall. It wasn't long after that, though, that reality would set in. My wife, my newborn son had to be evacuated. And just 16 hours later, we made that call to evacuate. I changed my first diaper in the back of an SUV. The next morning, we made it to my sister-in-law's home in Nashville, Tennessee, and it really didn't hit me until I saw the pictures of the flooding. Places that I drove by every day, going to and from work, were under 15 feet of water.
Here's the front view of the house.
A couple of weeks later, we were able to go back down and examine the damage at our home. And we were lucky. The storm surge had stopped a few blocks south of our house, but I'll never forget that smell. I'll never forget the damage that I saw driving back to our home. The place was unrecognizable, especially where the storm surge had flattened buildings. I think as a meteorologist, you often think about situations like this. You ask yourself what you would do, how you would handle it. But in the situation, when you get there, you just don't know until you're there. And I think that was the case with me.
Well, coming up on the National Weather Desk, we'll look at what's changed in New Orleans since Katrina struck the Big Easy. And we'll look at a new documentary on the tragedy that tells the story of Katrina through the eyes of its victims. And we have so much more content on Hurricane Katrina on our YouTube channel. Just head over to your YouTube page and search for Hurricane Katrina playlist. A new Documentary series from National Geographic is giving voice to the people of New Orleans, telling the story through the lens of those that survived Hurricane Katrina. Meteorologist Emily Gracie spoke to one of those survivors and the Oscar-nominated director of the series.
I was there. What the future holds, we are unaware. Storms like Hurricane Katrina historically are rare.
You're just not going to find better people than the people in New Orleans.
Tracy Curry is an Oscar-nominated producer and director, but when she was tasked to tell the story of Hurricane Katrina, she felt the weight of the mission.
Trying to make the invisible feel visible and make the implicit feel explicit. And so this was an opportunity to do that and to also do it in a way that restores this story to the people of New Orleans.
Giving voice to those who lived it.
3D glasses might need you up there. Death, destruction, despair, you bet people were scared.
One of those voices is Shelton Alexander.
Accountability to those souls, the sole reason I share. The truth is hard, at least it's fair, sad but true, I'll take you. I was there.
The flood did not discriminate. All races, all classes, like everybody lost a lot. But the recovery is where we sort of begin to see how some of those structures and institutions create a disparate outcome for some people and not others.
But we stood in very long lines, it was a desperate time. Can't let them forget, that's why I wrote these rhymes.
We see in the story that there were some dehumanizing kind of narratives about the way the people of New Orleans comported themselves during this incident. And I hope that we've done a good job and that people understand the truth, which is that the way they responded to this incident was extraordinary.
March and sung hymns with them like, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. In the Superdome, I'm gonna let it shine. God is good all the time.
These ties of kinship and community that they have in the worst of circumstances did not break.
And thank the Lord for the Air Force and the Coast Guard. Flew helicopter and rescue missions nonstop, got people and pets off of porches and rooftops. Naughty by nature would say hip-hop parade for General Honoré, and all first responders, I have to give them props. They saved so many lives and they worked around the clock. I'm from there, I'm from where we believe in everything happens for a reason in due season. You may or may not even care.
I hope that everyone else watches it, sees them in a way that they were not seen at the time.
They say God won't put more on you than you can bear. The Most High wanted me to be, so I was there. And that's in the past, and it may have taken a while, but I'm so glad I done got over. At last, I'm here now.
Well, to hear more from Tracy about making this documentary and to hear Shelton's full story, listen to this week's episode of our podcast, Off the Radar. You can also watch the National Geographic series Hurricane Katrina, Race Against Time. All episodes are streaming now on Hulu and Disney+. Well, many cities and towns along the Gulf Coast felt Katrina's wrath. One of them was Mobile, Alabama. David Glenn was a meteorologist at our station there 20 years ago. He now works in Tennessee. We asked him to share his memories working through Katrina.
This has a potential to be a catastrophic hurricane. This is how strong this storm is, and wherever it hits, in Louisiana, Mississippi, even close to us, it is going to have devastating effects and far-reaching effects.
It was a storm I'll never forget. Mobile County alone, Bayou La Battery, those areas along the coastline, the big shipping areas and fishing areas were inundated. The storm surge was devastating in those areas. Also, Water Street in Mobile, appropriately named, we had 13 feet of water pushed in from the bay into downtown Mobile. So the water was up almost to the traffic lights and the street lights. So that was more of in and out flooding with the storm surge. But all the while we're hearing these awful reports from coastal Mississippi, from Biloxi through Gulfport back to Pascagoula, horrific, where some people were trapped in their attics, where the homes were separated. Family members spent in two directions, sent in two directions across the open waters of the Gulf.
You're going to have to stay inside. And we always say the word hunker down. You got to hunker down, hide from the wind.
Right in the middle of our coverage that Monday morning, just after the second landfall across Mississippi, our generator catches on fire, which zaps us off the air. So we're going to send everybody to the radio stations. Well, that's right in the height of the eye wall, drawing closer, which is now impacting a large part of the Gulf Coast. We're on the far eastern edge of the eye wall, and we've got to drive about 5 miles to the radio building. And that was some white-knuckle driving. Height of the wind, the rain, you could hardly see. But we got to the radio building, and we resumed our broadcast there.
This is an old drilling rig that just broke from its moorings.
I credit having to go through the storms that we did prior from Ivan and Dennis to kind of give you the stamina to get through these. They're all a bit different, and they're all going to have the human toll especially. That was something that I can't believe is 20 years ago. It could still be fresh in your mind from all this, but it's a storm that's never going to leave me.
Well, while the impact is still being felt along the entire Gulf Coast, most cities and communities have recovered, and that includes New Orleans, where resiliency efforts continue today. Here's meteorologist Cheriston Clark with more.
New Orleans looks a lot different today than it did in late August and early September of 2005.
There was nothing, there was no life, there was no movement, there was no people, there was nothing happening. It was a major city and there was nothing there. It was just destruction.
Matt Clark, a retired chief gunner's mate in the United States Navy, was on board the USS Tortuga in 2005. Matt Clark happens to be my dad. His ship and fellow crew members were deployed to Louisiana following Hurricane Katrina's landfall.
We were kind of just trying to prepare for a little bit of everything.
My dad and the rest of his team were tasked with helping the Coast Guard the first morning they were there. Once they finished up, they went back up the Mississippi River to start helping those who stayed behind.
So the first people we found, they just wanted to leave. They'd been there long enough. We're talking, I think, 4 or 5 days now after the storm, so they'd had enough. And we just started walking the neighborhood, started walking the 9th Ward, and then we just ran into people. And as we ran into people, we just offered help.
Over the last 2 decades, they've been able to make improvements. A critical one, a new power station that came online just last month. This will help power the city's pumps, which has always been an issue.
And it's a massive pumping system, 30 pump stations. It has the equivalent capacity of pumping the Ohio River in the opposite direction. It's going to be a game changer for us as far as being able to really power that drainage system through anything.
There's also been added protection to the area, a 2-mile surge barrier.
But they can close that wall and it protects us up to 28 feet of storm surge.
And improvements to the levee system. All these changes and improvements, so hopefully the area will never have to experience that level of devastation again.
As we go to break, a look at New Orleans today, a rebuilt city that is as vibrant as ever. Well, hurricane forecasting has come a long way over the past 2 decades. Progress has been pretty remarkable. The National Hurricane Center has been on social media all week, making sure we are all aware of the changes.
It's been 20 years since Hurricane Katrina, and its hurricane forecasting has come a long way, including predicting where and when storms might form. Hi, I'm Philippe Papin at the National Hurricane Center. Back in 2005, tropical weather outlooks were just a block of plain text. No graphics, no percentages, just a short paragraph saying something might develop in the next day or 2. Fast forward to today, we can now spot potential storms up to a week in advance. You'll see color-coded graphics, development chances, and much more accurate predictions. But here's the big game changer. Even before a storm officially forms, we can now issue potential tropical cyclone advisories, getting warnings out earlier and giving you more time to prepare. We've come a long way, and we're not done yet.
And we'll continue to push Katrina-related content on our social pages, both today and tomorrow. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Just search for the National Weather Desk. We'll be right back.